The royal household has been awarded £369 million across 10 years to refit Buckingham Palace after the Prime Minister and Chancellor agreed increasing royal funding was the best way to fund urgent repairs. Within days, more than 100,000 people had signed a petition calling on the Queen to pay for repairs, with organisers pointing to problems with national housing, the NHS and austerity as reasons why the public should not foot this bill.
It's a big project. The palace has 775 rooms, 760 windows and 30,000 square metres of floorboards that would have to be taken up. That's enough wood to cover 3.5 football pitches. The building dates back centuries to the 1600s and has been vastly expanded over the years. It now receives around 500,000 paying visitors during public visits held in the summer.
Objectors consider it outrageous that ordinary working people are being asked to pay for much of the refurbishments. Labour and Scottish National Party politicians have questioned why the monarch was getting so much money when citizens are living in a state of austerity. There has been debate in Parliament and in the media about whether this public investment is justified. Why is the Queen so popular, and who should pay for the repair of Buckingham Palace? Simple questions we sought to answer. Let's start with this. What does the public think of the government's plan to spend £369 million refurbishing Buckingham Palace, whilst at the same time cutting key public services?
Buckingham Palace is one of the proper terms place, so it should be perfect, and I don't mind if she's spending some on to replace me. Yeah, that's fine.
For them, it's beneficial for them, but some people may argue with the fact that it may not be the, most important thing to be spending money on. There may be other things that people would see as more important or more urgent to spend money on. I'm not too sure, everyone would agree with it, but I guess the people who just love, the Queen and the whole royal family, they'll obviously be interested in that type of thing. But
it seems like an overspend, to be completely honest with you. I mean, the Crown Estate makes millions, hundreds of millions of pounds a year, and I'm surprised they can't pay for the upkeep of their own building.
Public pay to get their service.
I think it's a lot of money to spend on a palace, for a start. We could do some of that money ourselves. We're actors, we're struggling. So I think it's a lot of money, and it could be spent better.
I think it's a bit cavalier and absolutely ridiculous.
I think it's a big historic building. It needs work occasionally. I'm not sure how much they spent in the past, but it seems like the right thing to do. You don't want these big buildings to be falling down.
I think it's a waste of money. They shouldn't.
Buckingham Palace is a symbol of our country. We need to uphold and keep it maintained and lovely. I mean, the Queen brings in so much money in tourism and merchandise and revenue that we must continue this and keep it to be a gorgeous symbol of our country.
Well, I think Buckingham Palace is, first of all, a beautiful establishment and should be kept clean and nice. So it also brings a lot of money, so I think obviously it's a necessary thing to do that, and it pays off at the end of the day.
I think that's maybe a waste of money, basically, and I would say that I think they could spend money in other more important things.
Well, I don't like the idea, but I think the Queen's as an institution is worth it, eventually, anyway.
I don't think that's too good. It's a lot of money, do you know what I mean? Obviously Buckingham Palace needs restoration work, but it's a lot of money, and I don't think that our key public services should suffer.
I think that it's an historical building, so to some extent it might make sense to have a renovation for the building. Of course, there is a trade-off for the budget, and it is surely a tough decision, but also buildings of historical significance need renovation.
I think at a time when people in Britain are starving, when people abroad in other countries who Britain has routinely bombed along with all their allies, when these people are starving and living through the very real legacy of empire and war, and the people in this country are starving, I think the fact that they can use this money, which the public will have to pay for, to refurbish Buckingham Palace shows an acute lack of priorities, and actually it's a slap in the face for anyone living in Britain.
So empire has co-opted its working class into serving its interests. So I don't expect much outrage beyond maybe some leftists with regards to this expenditure. However, what it does tell me is that the empire is still strong. With Brexit, they're longing to do deals with the Commonwealth. They're around the world. In India recently, they're jetting off to Africa. You have Prince Andrew, Prince Charles doing trade deals in Saudi Arabia, selling arms. This is all on the up, this is all on the increase. So they need to refurbish their palace, they need to redo their buildings. So when they invite these people here as their guests to try and get more money for their country, now they're leaving the European Union, they're going to have to do that.
The royal household has huge wealth. Should they pay the refurbishment bill, or should the public pay a considerable proportion of it?
Yeah, it's a bit too expensive, but still, like, it's fine. She's the queen. So we look after her, she could look after us all the time. That's why.
Public pay to get their service.
Well, yeah, I think they should contribute. I think the public kind of plays their part, but I think it's important for people who, have a bit more to, give a bit more.
I think legally it's challenging because it's owned by the country rather than owned by the royal family, but I still think they should contribute to it. They benefit from it.
The public should not pay, because that means I would have to pay, and that's a nightmare for me. So no, I don't.
I think the idea of the public paying is probably not a good idea. I don't think they're going to be happy about it, and I hope they take to the streets.
I think the Queen has already given a load of her land over to the state, so I think it's not the state that's really paying for the Queen. The Queen has already given a lot of her money, so she's getting it back drip by drip from the government.
I think something could be worked out between a mixture of the two, but if the public pay everything, that's fine. I mean, they give us so much, their presence in the country, they're a symbol of British strength. It's necessary, however we do it.
Yes, no, I think the Queen should pay more, yeah.
I think they probably should. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it should come out of public budget at all, really. No.
I believe it could make sense to ask a contribution from the royal family, considering that they're using it. And of course, there is a lot of strain due to the current events on the finances, on the taxpayers' contribution. So it could make sense, probably, yes.
Not only should they pay for their own refurbishment costs, I actually feel that Buckingham Palace and the institution of monarchy, its assets should actually be auctioned off and possibly sold to pay for some of the destruction that this state has caused abroad. Now, there's always an emphasis on the people in this country that are suffering, and that is true, but we cannot separate the people from this country for the people that are living under the legacy of the empire abroad. So not only should they pay for whatever they want at Buckingham Palace, Balmoral, wherever they are, actually the royal family have a moral, and I would argue a legal and economic obligation to actually undo some of the damage they have committed globally in recent history and over the course of several hundred years.
The people of Africa have certainly been taking the brunt of it for the last 400 years, and indeed that hasn't stopped. If we look at the Queen's investments from Rio Tinto mining to the days of Tiny Roland with Romthro asset strip in Africa, those are the people that are really paying for this. The state was built off the back of that. So should the British public pay for the cost? That's up to them. That's up to them. What I want to see an end to is the rest of the world paying for the upkeep of these people. This is an internal matter for British people, but the sad truth is they're going to look to exploit Africa more. They're the number one leading power in Africa today, more than anybody else. Looting, plundering, that's what they do best. This is 2016, they're still the number one power, neo-colonial power in Africa.
Those who object to public investment in the repairs have described the royal family's wealth as enormous. According to Reuters, the British monarchy has assets worth about £22 billion. At the same time, ministers have said cuts must be made to government spending in a number of areas, directly affecting the public. The Queen already costs taxpayers £35 million a year. How does the public feel about the cost of the monarchy?
Of course, it is too much, but as I said, it's still our Queen, and she's one of the best queens in the world, so we look after her as well.
There's a lot of money. I think, they just need to weigh up the importance of it, whether it's the most important thing to be spending money on or not. I personally wouldn't say that's the most important thing. I think, you have to deal with more urgent topics before dealing with things like that. And
I mean, I wish it cost less, but then I guess there are associated benefits in terms of tourism, things like that. 35 is probably reasonable.
We are living in the crisis, so I think it's some cut costs we have to do for everybody now.
The Queen's amazing, though. She's sweet. I mean, she's a good-looking lady. No, I mean, we need a monarchy. We're the only European that have an established monarchy, and that's good.
I think they should probably have to do work placements in places like Tesco's and Sainsbury's, and maybe do some office jobs, maybe look at Excel sheets for a while, see how that feels, so they can really feel what it's like to be in normal people's shoes.
No, I'm happy to pay.
I think it should be lower. It should be reduced.
It's not a cost. It's a little something we put in to help do something great for the country. I mean, what do you think of when you think of Britain and British pride? Do you think of the monarchy and the strength of our empire over the years?
The cost of the monarchy, it's necessary. It's a symbol. It's pride. It's honor.
I think everyone has them way of life, and I respect it. So I guess that if she has that amount to spend, it's good for her.
Well, I think it's worth it. I think we get a lot from tourism, for instance, so you don't really know how much that's bringing in every year, but I still think she should pay more for the upkeep of Buckingham Palace.
Well, it's a lot of money. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of money, but our monarchy is great. Do you know what I mean? I'm a bit of a... I wouldn't say, I sort of love the Queen or whatever, but I think it's great. It's our heritage. She's head of the Commonwealth as well, so it's really good. But I think we've got to weigh up the pros and cons of the money, really. Do you know what I mean? So it's a lot of money, and it shouldn't really be coming out of taxpayers' money, I suppose.
I think that there are some costs, and there are also some, of course, revenues, for example, from tourism and other associated benefits, but at the end of the day, it also comes from, it is also a choice of the UK people. I'm a resident of the UK, although I'm Italian, to make their choice whether it makes sense or not to have a queen in 2016.
I think what this underscores is an acute lack of priorities from the British state. The Queen is the head of the British state, but I think there's a danger here that sometimes we focus too much on individuals, Trump, or in this case we're talking about the monarchy or the Queen. The thing that's far more dangerous than an individual like the Queen and the money that's used to pay for things for the Queen is a system and a culture that encourages and allows and celebrates these people being the head of a very real empire. So it's not just the case of the state is allocating money where it shouldn't. It's actually a case of the British people should not be standing for this. They need to understand the legacy of imperialism. They need to understand how the state and the monarchy are wedded to the foundation of the welfare state, and everything they want to protect is tied hand in hand with imperialism, and not just people that are suffering in the UK. So this is the context we all need to think about when we're discussing the role of monarchy.
I don't think that we should be expecting the rest of the world to foot the bill for them, which is the case. She is the head of Britain, she's the head of the British state, she's the head of state, not just of Britain, but of maybe 31 other countries in the world. So she's this big figurehead, this big mystique kind of figure. And they need her now, more than ever, to be representing empire, bringing back the old glory days. There's a lot of nostalgia in Britain for empire. So I expect they need £35 million. They need to spend this if they want to continue their imperialism, and their whole economy is based off imperialism. So to keep it afloat, they need the likes of the Queen, who is into line with the state and the security services and so on and so forth.
The government wants to cut income tax for Britain's richest earners and is spending hundreds of millions of pounds on repairing Buckingham Palace, whilst also cutting universal credit. How does the public feel about these spending proposals?
To cut the income, it's going to be terrible because a lot of people just living on that income, and I don't think it's going to be a good idea at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that cutting income tax for very high earners, I think it's probably a bad idea.
Tax the high earners 100%, because us lower class people, Amy included, we're struggling. So we could do with them paying the taxes because we have to pay everything.
I think these spending plans are pretty monstrous and again, pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I think there are tweaks available for the income tax bracket. I'm not sure about cutting for high earners particularly, but yeah, you could harmonise it a bit.
It's necessary. We must keep the wealth in the country, because if we raise taxes to a ridiculous extent, we're going to have more people going to tax havens, more people going to different countries. So as long as we keep an economically stimulated environment for people to live in, whatever works.
I think it's necessary to not necessarily cut them, but not keep them too high. It brings in income, it brings in jobs, it brings in wealth, and I think that's necessary.
I think they could do better than that.
Well, I think higher taxpayers should pay more, especially the top end. Universal credit, I'm not sure about that because the plans haven't been fully implemented yet, so I'm not too sure what that would mean.
I think in the different priorities, it's probably not. It would not be on the first ranked for me. It's probably better to cut taxes on the middle class and the lower earners, given the situation in the UK. Again, they're struggling to meet their needs. So I think it would not. This is not really a wise choice from the UK government, in my opinion. Yes.
The government, the Queen, the head of the state, has absolutely fundamentally got its priorities the wrong way round. The priority must be people in this country that are suffering, and the priorities have to be people abroad that are still living under the very real legacy of empire and colonial occupation, from Ireland to the ongoing economic presence of NGOs in Africa, to the support for the illegal settlement colonial enterprise called Israel. So I think we need to be very clear, and we need to understand that a complete change of culture and attitude is needed, because the only thing more problematic than this family, which rules over its subjects, is the fact that people that are suffering, working class people, cannot see that far from being loyalists to the Queen and the Empire, they should be loyalists to other people that are suffering like them in this country and abroad. We need to have an internationalist outlook. This idea of monarchy is so outdated, it belongs in something like storybooks, dragons, kings, queens. This is ridiculous. What do we need a queen for?
Well, imperialism, British imperialism, has always given a few crumbs to its working classes, so they, do the dirty work of it, in the army and all the institutions. So they'll always have to make sure they don't oppress them too much. They're testing it. They're taking more and more away from them. As times go on, with Brexit, we're going to see even more strenuous measures against British people, because they're going to be competing against rival imperial powers in Europe for their position. So taking away universal credit, I would say to that, I'd rather the English people here, the British people, lose some of this stuff that's been looted rather than keep taking it from our people overseas.
Despite being an unelected head of state who was born into her role, the Queen is very popular. Can the British public explain why?
No, I think she is from the royal family and we have to respect that.
I'm not too sure. I think it's just, to be honest, it's just British culture. Everyone just, loves the idea of a royal family, queen type of thing. No one voted for her or anything, but, the whole idea of the monarchy and the royal blood is just something that is part of British culture.
That's a really tough question. I guess she's endured. She's lasted a long time. Yeah, I don't know. Hard to say. Some people are committed royalists, some are Republicans. I guess I'm somewhere in the middle.
Because we're taught at school that she's our queen, she's our ruler. I think that's why we're taught it, yeah.
Maybe it's because she has really nice outfits and really nice hair. and always looks lovely and always says just the right thing in the nicest possible tone of voice. That might have something to do with it.
I think she's a great figurehead, and she's steered our country through thick and thin. So it's a good thing to hang on to. Governments come and go. Queen always here. It's great.
Because people choice. The Queen is a people choice.
And I think it's, it's unique, as I said before. It's unique, it's honourable, it's genuine, it's lovely, yeah.
She's just she's just a symbol for England, I guess, and for the world. So she's well born.
Well, I think she does a good job overall. It's just part of Britain.
She's great. She always looks lovely. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying I'm a royally, but yeah, she looks great. Her and her family do a lot of work across the world. Do you know what I mean? Especially the Prince Charles and the grandchildren as well. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think the monarchy's great, really. But yeah, it can't really. The monarchy can't really take too much of our money, can they? Really, because we need it for other essential services. So yeah.
I think people want to have somebody that they connect with emotionally on an emotional ground, and they want to have figures that are influential and leaders that they can connect to on an emotional point of view, and that's why it's still very popular.
Number one, I think let's be clear, there's a large section of the British public to whom the Queen is not popular. But to answer your question, why is she so popular in 2016? People are hungry, people are starving, pensioners are dying, innocent people are dying abroad because of the wars this empire has waged with the Queen at the head of it. Why do people revere this institution so much? You're talking about a process over many hundreds of years, from the foundation of this country to the present day, whereby the ruling elite, the top 1%, if you like, are just ruling the people with an iron fist and controlling them. How do you do that? You have to implement a system of entrenched classism. You have to make people think that somehow the aristocracy and these people who are born into wealth and privilege are better than you. So that explains why every time there's a wedding or a baby is born, everyone comes out in these absurd Masonic ceremonies, and it needs to go. People need to understand their interests are aligned with the entire working class, whether it's here or whether it's abroad, whatever colour you are, whatever religion you are.
There's always been this cult of mass hysteria and royal fetishism in this country with regards to the royal family. Now, in the 90s, the British Foreign Office rebranded the monarchy because it was starting to lose face with the Princess Diana thing and all that. So they've rebranded her, sent her around the world to India and all these places to not apologise for past colonial crimes, but just to acknowledge that they happened. Bear that in mind. She remains popular here because she is Britain. What she represents, that is the British state, that is the British Empire that they long for.
The British government is spending £369 million on refurbishing Buckingham Palace. Of course, it's not government money, but public money raised from taxpayers and spent on one palace in central London. And some question how this spending decision has been made. To many, it may seem confusing that a democracy is so attached to an unelected head of state, and that the UK government is so willing to invest in a palace whilst making cuts to public services. But the royal family continues to enjoy massive support in the country, and that speaks volumes about the public state of mind and the state of British democracy.